Ever since I was a little kid, I've always had dreams of becoming a police officer. But by the time I was arrested at 19 years old, I thought I had destroyed and derailed my whole plans at pursuing a career in law enforcement. But like I said, I looked up the criteria on what it took to become a police officer, and I saw that you just didn't need to have any felony convictions on your record. And since I pled guilty to a misdemeanor, I knew that wasn't going to affect my chances of becoming an officer, or at least so I thought. But that was a huge wake-up call for me. I figured I was thrown another lifeline, I was given a second chance at pursuing my career, and I didn't want to have anything to do with screwing that up. So almost immediately I cut out all the negative things in my life. I changed my life around completely. And at the time, I saw that you couldn't become a police officer until you were at least 21 years old. So by this time, I was turning 20 years old. My girlfriend was actually pregnant at this time, and I really started to need to figure out what to do. So I had about a year until I can get into any type of police department. So I immediately enrolled in college and majored in administration of justice. And it was at that time that I met two San Francisco police officers, Don Cartwright and Jim Gelf. And we just started small talking. We quickly became friends, and they sort of asked me, why I chose to study administration of justice. And I explained to them that I was pursuing a career in law enforcement, and I was only 20 and I was waiting for another year before I can start applying. And they were super encouraging. They were very inspirational. They would give me tips and things of that nature to what it was like to work at the department. They also even gave me ride-alongs. They even asked me if I was working at the time because coincidentally, Don Cartwright ran an off-duty program where he worked head of security for a sporting goods store. They had some side hustles, and Jim Gelf also had a little side hustle where he was head of security at a grocery store. So they asked me if I was working. I told them no, I was just going to college, and I sort of told them about my girlfriend being pregnant, and they thought it would be great. They thought it would be excellent if I came to work for them. They thought I had sort of a unique look that would work for working loss prevention undercover in their stores, and figured I could help and that I could use the job. So I quickly took them up on the offer and actually took two jobs. Don Cartwright gave me a part-time job and Jim Gelf gave me a part-time job. And I worked for each of them at their individual stores. I had no experience. I've never even done security before. I wasn't even sure I knew how to handcuff anybody at that time. But I figured it was a cool way to sort of get my feet wet, if you want to call it that. Sort of experience what it was like to apprehend people, sort of look for criminal elements and things of that nature. So it was a cool experience. I did that whole thing for a year. I worked for both of them for a year. But like I said, there's always stories tied into instrumental people that come into my life through the police department that I felt it was very odd how certain things happen to these individuals. I'll get to the story about Don Cartwright a little bit later. But Jim Gelf, once I was in, unfortunately I was off at this particular time. I actually had caught it on the news.
On November 13th, 1994, Gelf made the ultimate sacrifice. He was shot and killed by a carjacking suspect who was heavily armed, wearing body armor. The man unleashed 25 minutes of terror, firing at passersby and police.
The suspect unfortunately had a high-powered assault rifle. A gun battle ensued. Jim only had 6 bullets in his gun. He was able to discharge all 6, but ultimately the suspect caught up with them, and ended Jim's life. That was a very sad moment. He was a great guy. He was a great friend. I personally thank him for taking me on as a friend and as an employee and also as a co-worker. We had a lot of great moments talking and laughing together, and it was kind of sad to see him depart. So like I said, I was enrolled in college at the time, working 2 part-time jobs, and it was about 9 months into going to college and working that my first child was born. A beautiful baby, 8-pound, 8-ounce little girl. Yep, daddy's little girl. Of course, just like any new parent, it was an absolute wonderful and joyful experience. But I knew I had to step it up. I knew I had to step up my game, hurry up and find gainful employment so I could support my family and my new daughter. And I was getting close to turning 21. I had a couple more months to go, but I started applying for jobs just to see what was out there, but no agencies were hiring at the time. So from some of the people I've met through Dawn and Jim, other officers were encouraging me to sign up for an unaffiliated police academy. And I didn't know what that was at the time. I didn't know what an unaffiliated police academy was. But basically it's a police academy that you can put yourself through. Like, you don't need to be hired through a police department or another agency. You can pay and put your way through, and upon graduating, it makes you more desirable, more hireable from other police departments, because they don't have to spend resources setting you through an academy. They don't have to pay for it. You're pretty much ready to go and jump right into the street. So I took them up on that recommendation, and I started looking into regional police academies, or who was offering it. So I called around a few academies, and nobody was doing it. Up until 2 weeks into this, I found out that San Francisco was hosting their own regional police academy at the time. So I immediately signed up, applied, went through all their examination process, the written tests, physical agility tests, medical examinations, a little brief background that they do on you. And then I was accepted by the time I turned 21 into the Regional Police Academy. I didn't know what to expect, and I wasn't used to that paramilitary structure, but I quickly got used to it like anybody does. It was completely physically and mentally exhausting, and it's just like you would expect from any police academy. It was grueling, it was long, it was taxing, but nonetheless it was fun at the same time. I met a lot of cool people, made a lot of really good bonds, and actually some of the people I'm still friends with today. So after 6 months of the academy, I completed it, I graduated, but I still didn't have a job. Some of the other classmates that was in this regional academy with me were already affiliated with departments. Some were San Mateo, Millbrae, Concord PD, Pacifica, other agencies around the Bay Area. But after I completed the process, I knew my graduation certificate, my post-basic, was going to be good for 3 years. So I started applying almost immediately. Once again, there wasn't a lot of agencies hiring at the time. I put out some applications, got no bites. So I had to step back and decide what to do again. So I re-enrolled back into college, back into administration of justice, and then I took up a small part-time job working at a bank. I worked in the basement in the microfiche department, encoding bank checks. So now it's about another 7 months into going back to school and working part-time at the bank when I heard that San Francisco was opening up their doors to new applicants for the police department, and they were only going to be giving out about 400 of them. So from the resources that I had from the regional academy that I attended, I quickly told them about it, asked them about it, and they highly recommended that on the date that they release these applications, for me to get in line as early as possible so that I have an opportunity to be one of the 400 to receive an application. So I found out that the applications were going to be given out at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday from a local high school. So they recommended that I get there at 3 in the morning, even though they weren't going to pass out the applications till 9 a.m. The recommendation from resources at the academy was to start getting in line at 3 a.m. to ensure your spot within that 400. So I decided to take that a little bit step further. I actually went at midnight. And when I got there, I was completely surprised. The line was completely around the block. I couldn't even tell you how many people were in line. It looked like the premiere of a Star Wars movie. Everybody was in line with chairs, blankets. There was people camping on the sidewalk, cooking. They had barbecues out there. People were in this for the long haul. So I actually ended up camping for my first time on the sidewalk, outside from midnight till they opened the front doors at 9 a.m. So by the time 9 a.m. rolls around, they open the front doors and start handing out applications. One by one, we walked in that door. And to each person they handed out an application, they also assigned you a number. And that number corresponded to your application number. So by the time I received my application, I was about the 223rd person in line and the 223rd person to receive an application. So luckily I got there when I did. Otherwise, who knows if I would have been within those 400 to receive an application. So I was so excited once I received that application, no matter how tired I was from the little sleep I got on the sidewalk. I went home and I filled out everything, completed it, and turned it in by Monday morning. So once my application was accepted, I went through the whole process that you go through of becoming a police officer. I went through the written exams, physical agility exams, medical screening, psychological tests, psychological exam, the polygraph, and then the background, the lengthy background process. The whole thing took maybe around 7 to 8 months to complete, but it wasn't until about the 6th month into the process, my background investigator calls me up on the phone and tells me that I need to get down to her office quickly. She didn't say why, she didn't give me any more details, but she said to get down as quickly as possible. So I hung up the phone and I hurried up down to her office. She was working at 850 Bryant, so by the time I got there, I called her up. She let me in up to her office and she pulled me aside and said, "Look, what I'm about to tell you did not come from me. And if you repeat this or mention this to anybody else, I will deny that I ever had this conversation with you." So I had no clue what she was about to tell me, but it didn't sound good. What she told me was that she had completed my background package, her portion, and that she hand-walked it into the chief's office and the command staff, and she presented it to them. She presented my background package to them and said that this is a candidate who I recommend for the police department. Attached to my background packet is also a photograph of me. Every potential candidate has their photograph attached to their packet. Now, as she slid it across the desk to the chief and said, "I've completed this background package, this is who I recommend for the next police officer position," he quickly looked at my photo and said, "He is not the stereotypical police officer we're looking for. He is not what we want the role officer of a police officer to look like." And he slid the packet back to her and said, "No, thank you." Now, she knew that wasn't fair. She knew that was discriminatory because you can't just base it on somebody's appearance, but that's what they were doing. So she told me that she was going to try her hardest and her best to re-push my packet through. There was no guarantees, there was no promises, but she wanted to let me know, because during the course of her investigation, over the many months that she was doing my background investigation, she got to know me, and she took a liking to me, and she was encouraging through the whole process, and she was rooting for me. She really wanted to see me succeed. She thought I was a fresh breath of air for the department with a different style, different look, because at the time there wasn't a ton of minorities in the department. Everybody had that stereotypical police officer look, and I just didn't fit that mold or that profile. And she thought it was unfair, and she really wanted to see me succeed. About a month later, I received a letter from the San Francisco Police Department. I opened it up, I didn't know what to expect, and I remember reading, "Thank you for applying for the position of police officer. But we are sorry to inform you that you had failed in scoring the oral interview and the written exams. So therefore you are no longer being considered as a candidate for the police department." The letter further went on to state that if I feel any of the information or the scoring of my tests was inaccurate or incorrect, that I can protest it by writing a letter to the police department and providing any supporting documents or evidence to support my protest. So I knew there was no way that I could have failed any portion of their process. And based on what my background investigator had told me, I knew that they were basing this strictly and directly on my appearance. So I quickly wrote a letter to the police department protesting their decision, protesting that I failed. I requested a review of my oral interview, which at the time it was taped. I submitted my prior academy scores, my academy graduation certificate. I submitted character letters, and I protested their decision. Within about 2 weeks, I received another letter from the San Francisco Police Department. I opened it up. I wasn't really sure what to expect once again. And as I opened it, it read, "Thank you for applying for the position of police officer. We are sorry, but there was an error in scoring your oral interview and your written exams. Congratulations, you have passed the process and background. You have now been accepted into the San Francisco Police Academy." And then it gave me a starting date of the academy. I was so excited, I quickly called up my background investigator, and I told her the good news. And she was so happy, she was so excited, and she immediately told me. She said that she is so thankful and so glad that I protested that process and their decision on first denying me and failing me. She knew the reasons why they were doing that, and she even told me that that is part of the process, that those that they don't want in, for whatever the reason is, and in my case, it was my appearance, they quickly sent out that letter denying me, stating that I failed exams when that wasn't even true. But by me protesting it, my protest and my evidence and my information was now going to supersede the chief and was going to go directly to the commission, where they were going to be responsible for reviewing my protest. And the department knew that once the commission got my packet, that they can clearly see I did not fail any portion of the background. So they had no decision but to allow me entry into the police department. My background investigator gave me one last and final crucial piece of information. She stated to me, "Don't ever change. Don't ever change my style, my look. Don't change my personality. Don't conform to any standards the police department tries to put me through. Always remain myself. Keep friends outside of the police department. And never lose or change your identity to who they think you should be." I took those words to heart, literally. And that was the last time I spoke with my background investigator. She retired shortly after. And I always was very grateful. What I was about to experience next was a chain of events that I wasn't prepared for or expected from the police department. They were going to resist and try to prevent me from completing the police academy. But once you have strong will, motivation, determination, have a strong upbringing, nothing and nobody is going to stop you from achieving your goals. Now, the police department was playing games with me early on. They challenged me. Game accepted. Let's go.